والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we continue in Nuzhat an-Nadr, the Sharh of Nukhbat al-Fikr, and we finished the category of maqbool, what is accepted. I'm going to give you a brief summary, and before I do that, I want to make a point. For a lot of the durus that are coming up are going to be live streamed, so I suggest the Tulab Ilm subscribe and turn on notifications. So when we go live, you get a notification, and if you haven't, you should let others know as well, so you can watch live, and then inshallah we're going to work on having somebody check the questions in the live feed. So we can answer them as the dars goes on and make it more interactive, inshallah. At the end of these categories, I want to give you summaries, and that's for the Tullab Ilm to memorize, inshallah. So maqbool, as I have in my notes, what we have covered is maqbool is under two categories. It is accepted, right? Those are accepted ahadith. They are sahih or sahih li dhatihi wa li ghayrihi, and hasan li dhatihi and li ghayrihi. Maqbool, accepted, good. But then it goes under two. In salama min ma'arida, if it is preserved from any objections, and we'll talk about objections as a summary, then it's muhkam, then we give hukam on it. If it has an objection, then we look at, can we make one to be in a particular situation and the other a different situation, which is khas and am? Can we combine them? It's called mukhtalaf al-hadith like this. Can we say one is nasikh and one is mansukh, and we'd have to prove that with tarikh, yani with dates, say, okay, this was an earlier time, and then at a later time the hukm changed or developed or so on. Can we say that one is for a particular circumstances, for example, traveling or sickness and so on, or rain, and one is for am situations? Can we go through this category of say, okay, one is rajih because it has more supporting adilla, and one is marjuh, it is not taken precedence because it is not as strong as the other? Can we say one is shadh because it is contradicted by that which is stronger, and so on and so on, where we try to solve those issues of if we see something that is not cleared from objections. Otherwise, if we cannot figure out, we make we do waqf, we stop. We leave it for those ulama that come after us that can do that work for us. So this is the summary of what we discuss under maqbool. Tayyib. Now we get into فقال المؤلف, the muallif says ثم مردود. This is very important, very necessary for us to know category. This is the rejected ahadith. Mardud, that which is rejected. And this is under the category of understanding weak hadith. Now, remember, and this is very important for the Tullab Ilm to know and to be able to explain, there is a difference between a da'if hadith and a mawdu' hadith. A da'if, there is a weakness there. It is mardud, but it is not as bad as kadhab. That which is a lie upon the Prophet ﷺ, we have no use for that except to warn people against it. Tayyib, that is mardud. Tayyib, under mardud, then we've made two more categories. One is da'if, one is mawdu'. Mawdu' we're not even discussing here. That's a kadhab. We'll discuss it later, inshallah. But mardud can be da'if, and that's what we're going to discuss. Mardud can also have mawdu', and mawdu' is that a fabrication. We have to warn people against even using that for virtues or anything else. Tayyib. Under mardud, there can be two reasons for the rejection. إما أن يكون للسقط أو طعن. وقال في نزهة النظر إما يكون في سقط للسقط من إسناد، من الإسناد، والطعن في راو على الاختلاف وجوهات الطعن. طيب. So what can it be? It can be either weak due to a break, or a defamation, or a criticism of the narrator. So in Nuzhat an-Nadr, Ibn Hajar explains it further, right? موجب الرد, what are the reasons for being rejected? إما يكون للسقط. It could either be due to a break in the chain. What does that mean? We have a narration, we have chains of narrators, isnad. And in that, you have a rawi missing. ظاهرا or خفيا, we'll discuss that later. طيب? Or more than one is missing. So now this is a weakness. Or the other aspect of weakness is ta'an, is that there is a narrator who has been criticized for either weak memory or bad moral character or so on and so on. And there are many, as he says, اختلاف يعني of وجوه التعان, the different reasons and ways of objecting, and we'll talk about some of them. And this is more general, يعني this is يعني it's more عام than just to look at a rawi's ديانه, يعني his religion or his ضبطه or his accuracy. يعني what Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani is saying here in Nuzhat an-Nadr, in the explanation of Nukhba, is that there is more to the weakness of a hadith than just to say that there is a narrator who's a weak narrator or because of his memory or his moral character. There's a lot more that we look at than just that. And that's why I always give the nasiha to tullab, and don't just talk about sahih and hasan and da'if and mawdu'. Understand the subcategories and the differences between them. فالسقط إما أن يكون من مبادئ السند, يعني من أين؟ من بداية المصنف يعني. So he says, if we look at a weakness, which is a break, then it could either be from the beginning of the sanad. What does that mean, the beginning of the sanad? تصرف المصنف, يعني in Nuzhat an-Nadr he explains from where the action of writing begins from the author. So when he says the beginning of the sanad, you could take that two ways. The beginning could be closer to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or closer to the muhaddith who wrote down the hadith. So he's explaining, when we talk about the beginning of a sanad, here in this category, we're talking about closer to the one who wrote it. Because when you look at a hadith written down, it begins with the muhaddith. قال أبو داود, قال البخاري, قال أحمد, قال المالك. It begins with the scholar of hadith. So that is the beginning of the sanad if you're reading a hadith written down. طيب? So, or يعني if you're narrating, like in the old days when they used to report a hadith by orally narrating every time, they would say حدثني, he would say I was reported, I was told from, or أخبرني, or سمعت من, and then they would say the person, and then عن or any which way the tarf al-hadith is until Rasulullah sallam, that would be the end of the sanad. أو من آخره, or the end of it, يعني that is closer to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, أي يعني al-isnad. And he's explaining in Nuzhat an-Nadr, meaning the sanad بعد التابعي أو غير ذلك. يعني so what is the end of the sanad? After the tabi'i, which is a sahabi. So there could be a break either closer to the muallif who's writing, for example Bukhari and Ahmad and all those ulama of hadith, or to the end of the sanad that is after the tabi'i, which is a sahabi. So these are the two, أو غير ذلك, or anywhere in the middle of that. طيب. فالأول معلق سواء كان سقط واحد أو أكثر. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani here now gives a definition that يعني is not the one generally used, and he will also explain معلق a different way, but I will mention it first. So he says, if the break is the first type, what is the first type? يعني فقال إما أن يكون من مبادئ السند, يعني it could be either from the beginning of the sanad. Where is that? Closer to the author. So meaning, if the break is in the later generations, closer to the one who wrote down the books of hadith, then that type of a break is called mu'allaq. طيب. And then he says, even if it's one break or many missing narrators, it's mu'allaq. And then he, later on, he himself explains, and what is the general term mu'allaq used for is when the whole chain is missing. طيب. بخير, يعني, but when the break is later in the time period, but earlier in the sanad. يعني, when you read a book of hadith, if Imam al-Bazzar, for example, narrates a hadith, and the one he narrates it from has a missing narrator right after it. Or he narrates from somebody who's missing himself. Yani he narrates, but he doesn't say who he narrated from, but he gives the rest of the sanad. But the one closer to the one who's writing in the later times is missing. This is one type of break. Then the other type, which will be when it's closer to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the end of the sanad, the way we read it, and that's a Mursal Hadith. We'll get into that inshaAllah ta'ala. Tayyib. And then he explains another type, which is called Mu'dal. Mu'dal بأنه سقط منه اثنان, يعني when two are broken together. يعني there is two missing narrators in the chain right by each other. That is called Mu'dal. Tayyib. He doesn't introduce Munqati here, but he will later on. But this is just to make it easy for Tulab Ilm. I will summarize here. There is a Munkati hadith when there is a break in the chain closer to the hadith scholar writing it down, further away from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That means in the later generation, not in the Sahaba and Tabi'un, but later generations. This is Munkati. Tayyib. And that is a worse weakness than seeing an early break in the generations close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which would be Mursal, and we'll talk about that. So there is these two ends. Then there is, if there are two missing narrators. Now, obviously that's a worse break than Munkati', because Mu'dal, when there are two side by side, now you're not just worried about one narrator and whether he was a liar, whether he was strong in his memory, whether he was weak. Now there's two missing. That's a very strong weakness. Mu'allaq is usually used for i'laqan, yani it's hanging. What does that mean? The whole chain is missing, and that's the worst weakness out of these types of breaks. Tayyib. But let's go back to the matan, inshallah. Tayyib. فمن صور المعلق, and then he says from the types of, or the forms of mu'allaq, is when there is hadf jami' as-sanad, the whole chain is missing. And that's the usual definition of mu'allaq that's used by ulama of hadith. Tayyib, what does that mean? Means somebody generations after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes forward and says, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, who did you hear it from? Who did he hear it from? Who did he hear it from? You are 300, 400, 500, 200 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Show us your rijal, show us your chain of narrators up to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so we can judge to make sure that we do not attribute to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that which he didn't say. That's a beautiful and precise science. So if you don't have that whole chain, the whole chain is missing. This is a mu'allaq hadith, and this is the worst form of saqt, and the first worst form of missing. Now, if there is a narrator that's there, but he's kadhab, dajjal, if he's a liar, a fabricator, somebody like that, then obviously that's really bad too. But at least you know who he is, right? So that is also a really bad form of weakness, but that's under ta'an. That's under the criticism of narrators. Remember, we said two types of mardud, right? One is the missing links. Second is the criticism. Under criticism, al-kadhab, dajjal, not just ad-dajjal, the ones that will come at the end of time. Dajjal, meaning the liar. There are many narrators that have been criticized by being called dajjal. He was some of them were false prophets, some of them were known fabricators. They admitted to fabricating a hadith and so on and so on. Those are a hadith, and then they will get the hukm of being mawdu', being lies, and so on. But that's under ta'an. Under the issue of missing links, mu'allaq, when the whole chain is missing, this is the worst type of missing. Tayyib, and then it could be ومنها من سقط يحدث, that there is the hadf or the missing of everything illa sahabi, except the sahabi. Meaning hundreds of years later somebody comes and says Abu Hurairah who reported that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Well, obviously you're 400 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, so you never met Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. So where is that whole chain up to Abu Hurairah? So mu'allak is not just when somebody has the whole chain missing all the way to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It could be all the way to the Sahabi, but you still have hundreds of years of narrators missing, so it's still considered mu'allak. أو إلى التابعي أو صحابي معا, or it could be up to a tabi'i. Yani somebody says that Hassan al-Basri said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Well, first thing between that person and Hassan al-Basri is 400 years, for example. So you're mu'allakan there. And then there is another weakness there, which would be Mursal, but that's a lower weakness because he said Hassan al-Basri said Rasulullah said. He said, so it could be all the way to a tabi'i, to Rasulullah sallam, or it could be up to a tabi'i, a sahabi, to Rasulullah sallam, but between that tabi'i and this rawi, there is a huge gap. Not just a gap of one generation or one narrator, but it's a huge gap. So here you have different forms of mu'allak, but in all of them, the whole chain is missing. Tayyib, another form, and I'm going to summarize a little bit here, is that the person who reports it omits their shaykh. Yani, out of saqt we're talking about, somebody omits who they reported it from. طيب, now that comes into some tafsil. الصحيح في هذا التفصيل, يعني is this considered هل يسمى تعليقا أو لا? So now the issue gets to be that somebody hides who they were reporting it from. So here Ibn Hajar says that there is some detail required here, and that is correct. What does that mean? If you know that person to be a mudallis, tadlis, we're not going to cover in this dars. Inshallah, we'll cover tadlis in the next dars. Tadlis. But what is tadlis? When somebody is a mudallis, they hide narrators. They're not missing narrators, they're hiding them by using an or something ambiguous. So if it's a person who's known for tadlis, then that's going to be covered under tadlis. If it's not somebody known for tadlis, and we don't know who he reported from, then that will be under the issue of either Munkati or Mu'dal or Mu'allak, depending on how big the chain of missing narrators is. طيب, إنما ذكر التعليق يعني هذا هو المعلق في قسم المردود. لماذا؟ للجهل بحال المحذوف. He says, why do we mention this to be under weak hadith? Because we don't know the condition of those that are missing. So if you have one narrator missing, but we don't know now. What if he was a liar? What if he wasn't a liar? Maybe he was thiqa. Maybe he was somebody with a weak memory. Maybe he wasn't. But because we don't know, we do not attribute to the Prophet ﷺ with a sahih chain that which we don't know to be authentic. So we consider this a weakness. If we have two missing narrators, now we have multiplied the weakness. If we have 3 or 4, and we'll talk about that. طيب. Now, if there is a situation, وقد يحكم بصحته إن عرف بأن يجي مسمى من وجه آخر. Oh, what does that mean? It means that you could authenticate the narration if you know that there is another sanad that is connected that brings the same matan. What does that mean? Let's say you get a hadith which has a missing narrator. Now we have a problem, missing narrator. The problem is not that we know him to be weak, the problem is that we don't know their hal, we don't know their condition. Tayyib. But then you find another muhaddith or another sanad that is fully connected, but it brings the same wording. Now we are no longer worried about that break because we know authentic, reliable narrators have reported that through another chain, so it strengthens this one where the weakness goes away. طيب. فإن قال جميع ما أحذفه ثقات. طيب. Another situation. What if the one reporting it says that only thiqa narrators reported to me, but he doesn't mention them? Here, فجاءت مسألة التعديل على الإبهام. Now comes a issue of strengthening with ambiguity. What does that mean? If a rawi comes and says that only authentic, strong, thiqa narrators have reported all the way to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam this hadith, but he doesn't mention their names, he doesn't mention their hal. Now, what do? Do we just say, you know what, he said they were thiqa, so we're going to go with it? No. عند الجمهور لا تقبل حتى يسمى. According to the Jumhur al-Ulama, according to the majority of the ulama, we do not accept that unless he mentions them. Why? Because maybe he didn't know somebody is weak. Yani not every scholar of hadith knew the biography of everybody. And many scholars of hadith, they will say, yani this hadith is sahih, and then a muhaqqiq will come and check the sanad and say, no, there's a narrator in here that's known to be a liar. And that may not have been known by that scholar who originally authenticated. So now, when we don't have the names of the reporters to verify, we can't just assume that what that original person narrating said about that hadith was correct. The science of hadith is that precise. And this is the opinion of the Jamhur. Then he mentions the opinion from Ibn Salah. And actually, it's not different from the Jamhur, only in what it seems. He says that if it is, for example, reported in Al-Bukhari, then what does he mean? How can we have a mu'allaq hadith in Bukhari? And there are mu'allaqat of Imam al-Bukhari. Tayyib. And I want to clarify this issue because many people get confused with this. Imam al-Bukhari has a hadith in his Sahih. Yani those are a hadith as a part of Sahih al-Bukhari. And those are the ahadith reported in his Jami' with the sanad, with the chain of narrators. Tayyib. Those ahadith are considered a part of Sahih al-Bukhari. But Imam Bukhari has an interesting method of writing. He was such a genius in hadith that he would name his chapters with the wording of a hadith. Instead of just naming his chapters himself, he would use wording from different ahadith as a title, as a chapter heading. Now those ahadith, he didn't mention the sanad because he's not attributing those to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's just a very creative, yani just a high level form of writing. And that's his expertise. He was so good in hadith, he could use wordings from a hadith to explain to you what chapter his ahadith will be under. But those ahadith which are called mu'alliqat of al-Bukhari are not considered part of Sahih al-Bukhari. That's just a chapter heading. Some of them are sahih, some of them are not. But almost every single one, at least that I have found and researched and I sat in durus of, they do have asanid. They're not mu'allaqan, yani mutlaqan. What does that mean? That means it's only the form that he wrote it, he didn't put the sanad. But the asanid are there. If you go into the other books of ahadith, you will find the asanid. Why did he not mention the asanid? Because those are not a part of Sahih al-Bukhari. It's just a creative way to title the chapters. Those mu'allaqat are not considered mu'allaq ahadith. Why? They're only written in mu'allaq form. I'll give you another example. Riyad al-Salihin, or Targhib al-Tarhib, or Umdat al-Ahkam, or Bulugh al-Maram. These books of hadith are later books. They don't mention the sanad, but they will reference the book of hadith. Bulugh al-Maram, Riyad al-Salihin, or these, they will say, Akhraj al-Imam al-Bukhari, Akhraj al-Bukhari, or Akhraj al-Muslim, or Rawahu Abu Dawood, or so on and so on. So what does that mean? They are written in mu'allaq form. What does that mean? The sanad is not mentioned there. Imam al-Nawawi is saying that an Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, an al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So between al-Nawawi and Abu Hurairah, there's a big chain missing. So it is mu'allaq, but it's not actually mu'allaq because he says Rawahu Tirmidhi. So then you can go to Tirmidhi and find the sanad. So sanad is there. Tayyib? So that type of a hadith is not considered da'if by itself because it's not that the sanad is missing. It's just the one writing the book didn't feel like writing out the whole sanad here because he referenced the original book. So in those ahadith, you go back to the original book, you find the sanad, and you can see whether they're sahih or da'if or matruk or so on. But if in the original books of hadith there is no sanad, yani a hadith that's reported without any asanid at all, then that is mu'allaq mutlaqan, and that is an extremely weak hadith. Because you may have 7-10 generations of missing narrators. 7-10 generations of possible liars and possible fabricators and possible people of weak memory and so on and so on. So, here Ibn Hajar also says, not to go deeper into the subject, he goes, I've discussed this in the Nuzhat ala Ibn Salah and so on. But in summary of understanding Mu'allaq, there is the break that can be in the beginning, closer to the author, or the break can be later. Closer to the author, this is going to be under Munqati, and then if there are two, that's going to be Mu'dal. If it's going to be a large amount, 3, 4, 5, the whole chain is missing, that's going to be considered Mu'allaq. Now, what if the break is further from the Mu'allif, from the Muhaddith, closer to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? This brings us to the next category, which is called Mursal. Mursal الثاني هو ما سقط من آخره من بعد التابعي فهو Mursal. Ibn Hajar Asqalani explains here the second is what there is saqt. There is a missing narrator at the end of the chain. Remember, in this categorization, we're looking at the beginning being closer to the scholar of Hadith and the end being closer to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in that case, if it's after the tabi'i, and we'll discuss that it also includes the tabi'i, but if it's after the tabi'i, then this is considered mursal. Mursal is a type of hadith where the sahabi or around the sahabi, and we'll explain what that means, is missing. Tayyib, what is the surah of this? Suratuhu, he explains how would this be? An yaqul at-tabi'i, if a sahabi says, and it doesn't matter if he is kabir or saghir, if he's a earlier tabi'i or a later tabi'i, in tabaqat will explain the differences, but he's saying all of that is considered under being a tabi'i. Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kada, the Rasulullah sallallahu said this, or fa'ala kada, or did this, or fu'ila, or it was done in his presence, or something like this. But now the tabi'i is saying Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. So now we know that those who met Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a state of iman and died in that state are considered sahaba. Tayyib. So if a tabi'i is saying it, now we have a problem. What's the problem? There is a missing link. But the missing link here is between a tabi'i and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So who's in that bracket? Mostly it's going to be the sahaba. So it's not as weak of so mursal ahadith are weak, but the weakness is not that serious. And that's why I want the Tulab ilm to understand the differences. A mu'allaq hadith is extremely weak, way weaker than a mursal hadith. Mursal hadith, if the one missing is Sahaba are all thiqa, Sahaba are all adilun. So, it's not that weak of hadith. Is it still considered weak or not? We'll discuss that inshallah. طيب. فإنما ذكر في قسم المردود لجهلة البحال المحذوف. Because so why do we mention a mursal hadith to be disregarded, rejected? Because we don't know the hal, we don't know the condition of the one who's missing. Tayyib, it could be that it's a sahabi. And as we said, we don't criticize the sahaba. Sahaba were all adilun. That's the usul of the Ahl Sunnah. So why is there a problem? If the missing one is a sahabi, why is that a problem? Sahaba are all good. Well, because he says that it could be al-yakun tabi'an. Because many tabi'in reported from other tabi'in from sahaba. So the missing link here doesn't necessarily mean it was a sahabi. Sometimes a tabi'i who's a senior tabi'i says, قال أحد من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, said one of the companions of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, if that's a later and early tabi'i who are from the kabir, the bigger tabi'in, the earlier ones, then, and you could make a case for that being still authentic. But again, that's not the case in every mursal hadith. Could be that 2, 3, 4, 5 tabi'in were in that missing link, because we don't know. So this is why he says that a thani, the second, when it could be from a tabi'i, an yakun da'ifan, it could be weak. And Ibn Hajar is explaining that if it was a sahabi for sure, then we have no problem, we say hadith is sahih. But because it could be a tabi'i, and that tabi'i could be weak, there were weak narrators amongst the tabi'un, so this is why this is considered a weak hadith. And it could be that he is thiqa, he is strong. And it could be that there are multiple missing tabi'un. طيب أن يحتمل أن يكون حمل على التابعي آخرة. يعني these tabi'in report from other tabi'in. ولا ثاني فليعود. يعني in the second we go back to احتمال سابق. يعني we go back and look at this and it does متعدد. يعني it could be multiple tabi'un. Then he says regarding the opinion that this is an endless break, like it could be hundreds. Well, we don't really say that because he says imma, yani what we find from the tabi'un, the most they reported from other tabi'un is sitta or sab'a, and he's 6 or 7. And if you look at the generation of tabi'un and them reporting from each other, the most you find is 6 or 7. But that means a mursal hadith could possibly have up to 7 missing narrators. Could be, and that's the worst case scenario. So this means it is a weak hadith. Mursal is a weak hadith, but this is the lightest form of weak hadith because we don't know for sure any ta'an. This is the early generations, so they're better than the later generations where the fitan became more. And if it is a sahabi, then this is a sahih hadith. The only reason we consider it weak because it could be a tabi and it could be up to 7. So this is a form of weak hadith. وإن عرف أن عاد التابعي إنه لا يرسل إلا عن ثقة. طيب, what if you know that the tabi'i who's reporting it from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not report except from strong narrators, other tabi'in, or only from the Sahaba? Then the Jumhur al-Ulama, they said tawaqquf. They said just stop, leave it. Don't give a hukam on it until you investigate other paths. Tayyib. And this is one of the aqwal of Ahad al-Qawl, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the great muhaddith, great scholar of hadith and fiqh and so on, and aqidah, as Ibn Hajar mentions here. And then there is the other qawl, which is that of the Malikiyin and Kufiyin, the ulama who were following the madhab of Imam Malik, and the ulama of Kufa, including Ahlul Rai, those who followed Abu Hanifa and others, يقبل مطلقا, that they would, if they find a mursal hadith by somebody who would usually report from authentic thiqa narrators, they would accept it. This is their opinion. With Shafi'i, Imam al-Shafi'i radiyallahu anhu, he would accept it if there was some supporting evidence, or yani, which he doesn't mention here, but I can tell you from other studies of hadith where it was reported from somebody like Sa'id ibn Musayyib and others who only reported from the Sahaba. If you could make sure it was a Sahabi. Tayyib, having said all this, and he gives the opinions here, according to the usul of hadith, a mursal hadith is da'if. This is the usul of hadith because we have saqt, and we cannot prove that it was definitely a Sahabi. This is it. According to its use by fuqaha, this is up to the fuqaha. Different madhahib have their own usul regarding mursal ahadith. If we find a mursal hadith and you can 100% prove that it was a sahabi, like the tabi'i is himself thiqa, has good dabt and adal, and he says that the one I heard it from a sahabi without mentioning the sahabi's name, or it was one of the sahaba that never reported, one of the tabi'un that never reported except from a sahabi, you could make a case for that being authentic. But except for that, mursal ahadith in the usul of hadith are da'if. Tayyib. And then he mentions that there were ulama like Abu Bakr al-Razi from the Hanafiya, from the Ahnaf, and Abu al-Walid al-Baji from the Malikiyya, Imam al-Baji, the famous Maliki faqih and alim, and they would not accept the mursal ahadith even from the thiqa, yani without, or from others, they would just reject them altogether. And this is a different opinion he's mentioned here, but as we said in summary, mursal ahadith do have a weakness. I mean, from the 5 usul we talked about, there is saqt. But if you can prove the one missing is a Sahabi, then you can make a justification to accept it and to use it. If not, then it is weak. Tayyib. The next two categories, and I'm going to cover them in some brief manner here, and we'll stop for today, is Mu'dal and Munqati. Mu'dal, we already talked about it, but he talks about it here again, that if the saqt is bi'ithnain, yani two that are together, then this is considered Mu'dal. And if the saqt is not with two together, or yani if they are separated, or in saqata wahid, or one, but this is closer to the hadith scholar, further away from Rasulullah sallallahu فَهُوَ Munkati', and we talked about this already. So you have a chain of narrators. Starts with the muhaddith, the one who wrote down the hadith, and then he says who he heard it from, who he heard it from, who he heard it from the tabi'i, from the sahabi, from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If the break is closer to the one who wrote down the hadith, and there is only one person missing, then this is considered Munkati'. If there are two missing together, this is considered Mu'dal. If there is more than one missing, but they are not together, they are here and there in the chain, that is still Munkati'. If the whole chain is missing, this is Mu'allaq. And if the one between the tabi'i and the sahabi or the tabi'i here is missing in that early generation towards the end of the sanad, this is Mursal. And this is the Zahir, yani those breaks that are apparent. From the Khafi, from those that are hidden, which is Tadlis, we will cover in the next dars. Jazakumullahu khairan.